Hey everyone, today we're going to tackle one of the biggest questions there is. How do we actually decide what's right and what's wrong? It's something every single one of us grapples with, so let's really get into the mechanics of our moral compass.
You've been there, right? That feeling in the pit of your stomach when you're facing a really tough choice and you're just not sure what to do. It's totally universal. So let's explore where that feeling even comes from and how we try to navigate these huge decisions. So where do we even begin? Well, a good place to start is with the foundations we often build our decisions on. Things like science and law. We like to think of them as solid ground, but as we're about to see, that ground can shift a lot. Okay, just take something that feels super concrete, like science. Ask a seemingly simple question. How old is the Earth? Well, back in the late 1700s, scientists were confident. 1.6 billion years. But then, a century later, that number totally plummeted to as low as 24 million. By 1907, it was back up to 1.6 billion. And today, the consensus is 4.6 billion. The wild part is, each of these was considered scientific fact at the time.
And it's not just science. Look at our laws. In 1895, the famous poet Oscar Wilde was thrown in prison just for being gay. It was a serious criminal act. Fast forward to 2013, in the very same country, and same-sex marriage becomes a protected legal right. So, if the very foundations of science and law can completely flip, what on earth are we supposed to build our moral compass on? All this uncertainty, it leads us right into the heart of a huge, fundamental debate. Is truth fixed and solid, or does it change with the times? And this one question really leads to two totally different ways of seeing the world.
On one side, you've got what's called relative knowledge. This view says that truth is something we create. It's made by humans, and it's always changing and evolving with society. It's kind of like a revolving door of human ideas. But then, on the other side, there's absolute knowledge. This argument says that real truth comes from a perfect, supreme source. It's handed down to us. From this perspective, truth is like bedrock. It's unchanging and eternal. Why would it ever need to change?
Okay, so let's shift gears a little bit. Let's move away from the source of morality and talk about how we actually use it in our day-to-day lives. When we're faced with a tough choice, our brains tend to rely on two really different ways of reasoning to figure out the right thing to do. First up, we have something called consequential reasoning. And really, it's all about the outcome. The name kind of gives it away, right? The consequences. The morality of what you do is judged purely by the results. You see this all the time with slippery slope arguments. Someone might argue against legalizing marijuana, not because it's evil on its own, but because they believe it could lead to the consequence of more people using harder drugs. And then you've got the other side of the coin, categorical reasoning. Here, the consequences, well, they don't really matter. Certain actions are just seen as fundamentally right or wrong, period. It's all about duties, rules, and the nature of the act itself. Now, to really see these two ways of thinking go head-to-head, there's no better example than the famous trolley problem. So picture this. There's a runaway trolley, and it's speeding down a track towards 5 people who are tied up and they can't move. If you do nothing, all 5 of them will die. You happen to be standing right next to a lever. If you pull it, you can switch the trolley to a different track. The problem is there's a one person tied up on that track. So what do? Most people, when you ask them, they say, yep, pull the lever. Their logic is pure consequence. 1 death, while awful, is a better outcome than 5 deaths. Okay, now let's switch things up. Same trolley, same 5 people in danger, but this time you're not near a lever. You're on a footbridge overlooking the track, and you're standing next to a very large person, and you realize the only way to stop that train is to push this person off the bridge and onto the tracks below. Their body is large enough to stop the trolley. Now think about it. The math is exactly the same, right? 1 person dies to save 5. But is it okay to push them? Here's where it gets fascinating. Most people's answer completely flips. They say no way. Even though the numbers are identical, the act of physically pushing someone to their death feels fundamentally different. It feels like murder. It feels categorically wrong, and the consequence doesn't matter anymore. So what does all this show us? Well, the trolley problem just pulls back the curtain on the fact that our moral judgments aren't some kind of pure, cold logic. No, it's a messy mix of emotion, biology, and as one writer wonderfully put it, the wiring of our squishy, flimsy brain. In fact, scientists know that damage to a very specific part of the brain can completely change a person's moral compass.
Okay, so up until now, we've been talking about morality like it's a system of rules we're just trying to figure out. But what if the whole idea of right and wrong is actually the problem? There's a third, pretty radical perspective that challenges the very idea of morality itself.
The Sufi poet Rumi had this incredible line centuries ago that really gets this idea. He said, "There is a field beyond right and wrong. I'll meet you there." It's this beautiful invitation to step outside of all the labels we use to judge each other.
And to bring it into more modern terms, the mystic Sadhguru puts it, well, a lot more bluntly. He says, morality is a big circus. The argument is that it's just this elaborate show we humans put on, and maybe this game is causing more harm than good. So, what's the logic here? Well, this viewpoint asks us to just look at nature. Trees, tigers, ants, they don't have a moral code. They don't have a concept of right and wrong, yet they exist in this incredible, complex harmony. Meanwhile, humans, with all our different moral systems, we're the only species that wages organized war against ourselves. This view suggests morality is just an artificial, man-made idea. So what does it mean to live in your essential nature? It's not about chaos. It's about acting from a place of conscious clarity, instead of just following a pre-written rulebook. All right, so we've looked at how our rules can change. We've dived into the whole absolute versus relative truth debate. We've seen how our own brains wrestle with these choices. And we've even considered just tossing the whole rulebook out. Which brings it all back to you. When you really boil it all down, it seems like there are three main paths you can take to build your own moral compass. One, you can ground it in reason and society, accepting that rules are made by us and they're going to change. Two, you can ground it in an absolute unchanging truth that comes from a source beyond humanity. Or three, you can seek to live in your essential nature and try to move beyond the whole construct of right and wrong entirely. So, at the end of the day, the question is for you. What is your foundation? Are you building your moral life on the shifting sands of society, the solid bedrock of absolute law, or are you choosing to navigate by the natural flow of life itself?